There's task force test number 3.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you to staff for joining us and to my fellow task force members. Welcome to our Mayor's Task Force on Transparency, Access, and Accountability meeting for April. Nice to see everybody again. Obviously, we didn't have a chance to convene in March due to everything related to the cyber attack that is still ongoing. So remains a topic of interest to our committee, but glad that we have a chance now to be together in person again. So I will now formally call our meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please confirm our quorum is present?
Yes, Co-Chair, quorum is present.
Okay, thank you. And to start our meeting, I'd like to offer our land acknowledgement, which is noting that the City of Hamilton is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase of 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We recognize we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. And in doing the work of this task force, we certainly have these principles and commitments in mind as we go through. So moving on to our agenda, are there any changes to the agenda to be noted?
There are no changes to today's agenda.
Great, thank you. So may I please have a mover and a seconder, Bill, to approve the agenda as presented. Are there any discussion about the agenda items? Okay, seeing none, please indicate your vote in favor. All right, we are all in favor, so the motion is carried. Any declarations of interest to note?
I have no declaration of interest, but I'll just bring to your attention that we have Tanashi joining us virtually there.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Tanashi. Welcome. Didn't realize you were behind me there. Okay, excellent. Okay, so no declarations noted, so thank you. We will move on from that item. Confirming that the minutes of our previous meeting, which was February 20th, 2024, were circulated along with the meeting agenda and package. So may I have a mover to put the minutes on the floor? Thank you. And a seconder? Okay, seconded by Bill. Are there any questions or conversation related to the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, great. Seeing none. So I will ask for a vote on the minutes of the previous meeting with a show of hands. All in favor? All right, we are all in favor, so the motion is carried. Moving on to communications. So the next item was referred to our task force for our information, and that is the document that was included with the meeting package entitled Improving Service Standards and Transparency Servicing Residents with the Office of the City Clerk, and that was referred as a document of interest from the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee. So that is circulated as an item of interest. If there's any comments or conversation or anything that anybody wants to draw our attention to. This document in general is an input, obviously, to our process as we consider what our final recommendations will be. Okay. Okay, so seeing no items of conversation, we'll note that the document was well received. Clerk, we have to do a motion for the receipt. Okay, so I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for putting the item on the floor first. Okay, thank you, Joanne, seconded by Bill. No questions or comments, so we will vote to receive the item with a show of hands. All in favor? Great, we are all in favor, so motion carried. And we will include this. We are, as we go along our process, collecting various inputs, documents, previous work that's been done by other interested parties into our kind of database. So we appreciate having that as an item to refer to. So moving on to our work plan, before I get into that formally, so we're at 9.1 now, I'll just make a few notes. We set ourselves a very specific work plan for 2024. It's still our intention to continue with that work plan. Just with having lost a meeting, our plan is just slightly compressed. So our original work plan referenced the fact that we would be doing engagement with interested parties and as well our research phase into July, and then starting in into June, and then starting in July to be writing our report. I think that's just going to have a little bit of an overlap now. So just based on our timing, I think we'll still be conducting some of our research and engagement with interested parties into July, but also starting the process of writing our report. So I think that's the only slight tweak. Otherwise, we'll continue to proceed according to the work plan that we set out at the beginning of the year. So that's just one point to note. As well, we are, although not formally included in our meeting materials, we're continuing to make notes about different topics and themes that come up, whether in the past or that are recurring throughout 2024 that are of interest to our review. So we look forward to collating all those notes together. And as well, we're making notes about recommendations, ideas that are coming forward that we're not formally recommending yet, but that are part of our purview. So before we formally go into our work plan update items, I'll just open the floor if there's anything else. We haven't met for 2 months formally, if the committee wants to note about things related to that. Joanne?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the information we're collecting. We're really getting some really great data to formulate where we're going. But I'm really impressed upon the fact that we really do need some kind of IT interface that pulls everything together for counselors, for residents, and for staff to make it easier. Like efficiency is everything. So I'd like to take some time over the next while too to bring back some ideas. Right now it's just a thought, and I'd like to do some research and bring it back to see what benefits it would have for a recommendation at this point.
Absolutely, awesome. Thank you for that, Joanne. So we look forward to you bringing that forward at a future meeting. Any further notes from the task force just before we jump into our formal discussion items? Okay, seeing none. So we will move on to 9.1A. So there were formal materials circulated for this. This is the work plan for our engagement with interested parties. So before we get into it, just an overall note that it's become obvious to the committee that we have our work that we're doing right now, and we realize that we look forward to the support of professional support through this process, and that it's kind of become a priority to have our partner by our side as we go through more of our work. Notwithstanding that, we have started to pull together some of the elements that will both, I think, inform who retain to work with us and ultimately inform those that we end up engaging with to collect inputs through this process. So the document that was circulated, which was put together by members of our task force, included a number of potential constituents, both individuals and organizations that we might look forward to engaging with. And it also included a number of different modalities of engagement that we might look forward to engaging with them through. So I'll open the floor. I'll invite especially the members of our task force who took the time to put this document together to offer any comments on it. And I think that, again, although this may not be formally enacted in terms of outreach until we have our partner on board, that we won't want to advance our thoughts around this engagement process along the way. So Bill, Madeline, anything you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a little overview of the philosophy that Bill and I approached this with. I think it was really in follow-up to our prior committee discussions, recognizing that we want the engagement to be very broad and at the same time prioritizing those key groups, community groups in the Hamilton community, and ensuring that we are placing proactive priority on equity deserving people from equity deserving groups and backgrounds and perspectives. So I think that, if for anyone who's reviewing this document here, hopefully that comes through. We've got main categories being citizens, elected officials, key city departments/staff, institutional partners, and community organizations as the main categories, just so that we could kind of cluster them. And then we've got really more high-level overview of the potential methods of engagement, which of course the details would be to be determined. So happy to answer any questions or any further discussion. Anything I missed, Bill?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's an exhaustive list. It was a brain dump at this point. We tried to get everything on paper that we could think of in terms of different groups, and different ways to interact with them. So it's certainly not done. And if there are any additions from anyone around the table, we'd be happy to add them to the document. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill and Madeline. I mean, I think it's an excellent piece of work, so I appreciate you going through the effort to pull such a diverse set of constituencies, individuals, and organizations together. I mean, stated publicly, if anybody out there in general has any recommendations for anyone that they feel would be very important to engage with, I think this group is very open to that and is looking forward to that, so we really appreciate it. Also made a note in the communication here as well that the list is not exhaustive. On the flip side of that, with our small but mighty team and the time frame that we set ourselves out for our work plan for 2024, it may not be possible to talk to everyone in the city, but one thing we do want to make sure, and we'll talk about this further when we talk about delegations and other input methods, is that everybody who wants to has an opportunity to provide perspective or feedback to our committee, and also that this is a point in time that we're developing a report, but it's obviously an ongoing commitment or intention to transparency and communication to be engaging with interested parties in general. So we're going to do our best. We're going to make sure everybody who wants to have a chance to talk to us. Our intention is to reach out as comprehensively as possible, and noting the constraints of our time and capacity, and then ensuring that we have the insight that we need to be able to form a well-reasoned report. Did you want to touch maybe as well, you had some excellent recommendations in terms of the potential methods of engagement. There's some.
I can get started. Again, I think we just had an opportunity to do a deep dive in follow-up to some of the brainstorming discussion we had at the prior committee or working task force meeting. So I think, there had been discussion about the Engage Hamilton platform, and so more of a survey or an online questionnaire, recognizing that not everybody has that same online access and wanting to be using multiple media opportunities. There was also discussion about mail, telephone, and then of course, you've just made reference to delegation, but I think there's some opportunities for some rich in-person engagement, whether that be focus groups, delegations to our meeting, or outreach to community groups.
I'll just add on because I think it kind of builds on a little bit what Joanne was talking about in terms of that centralized data repository. The one thing the city has is that common customer service 546 city phone number that is a single point that they can direct everyone to. So I'd be interested in sort of looking or knowing more about what potential opportunities there are there. So everyone who calls in, much like you do with any other company, after you've done your call, would you like to take a brief survey, that kind of thing. What options exist with that platform that we could use, given that that's the number that people are reaching and contacting the city with?
I'd be interested in finding out what modes suit what groups, you know what I mean? Because usually community groups would like to talk to you in person, but corporate groups are very busy. They'd like to maybe submit something. So maybe Engage Hamilton might have some preliminary data on what they found, and maybe we can take it from there.
I think there's also the opportunity, people, citizens reaching out to talk to their councillor or the mayor's office. What happens with that information? Does the councillor's office maintain a record of, we got 25 phone calls about this, or whatever, and is that information shared across the city, or is it siloed in the councillor's office? So there may be opportunities there, and again, pointing to that common high-level system architecture that Joanne was talking about. Maybe there's a way there that kind of information feedback from citizens, whether they reach out through the 546 city or through their council or the mayor's office, all of that data can be collected.
Since you brought it up earlier, you made a reference to the platform you're referring to, but you're mentioning that there is something like used in other municipalities that you're familiar with?
Municipalities, and it includes every target group.
Oh.
Yeah, it's actually for municipalities. It includes portals for councillors. It includes portals for the citizen. It includes portals for somebody calls into a department, someone's taking the message, they put the information into the system so everybody is aware. So it really includes, it also does forms online, it does survey, I think it might do surveys too, I'm not sure. But I think it's just the start of understanding. I remember when you're dealing with networks, you have to have access to current information in real time. If you don't have that, you're dead in the water. So when I started at Food Share, they did Post-its and recipe cards, okay? So I don't think the city's that, but I'm saying once you elevate it to a certain point, everybody has to have access who needs access to that information. And right now, that doesn't seem to be happening. I'm going to do a little bit more investigation in the city as far as what happens when that happens, but I really believe that this that one interface would really be helpful.
Oh, Tanashi, please jump in.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, like I just wanted to, this is great. The document is great. And I appreciate the lens that both Madeline and Bill used to make sure that groups that often aren't at the table are kind of thought about. The one thing I would add, again, I don't have much knowledge of institutional partners in the area as I'm relatively new to the area myself. But I noticed that, for example, under the business category, we're engaging the Chamber of Commerce, which is important, but also thinking about if we're using a model or a lens which allows those who are most disengaged to be engaged. The Chamber of Commerce probably might not be representative of the business the businesses that aren't part of the Chamber of Commerce's. And so I guess for the work of whoever takes on a more detailed approach to this, I think a note is important that in each category, ensuring that we're not just getting those typical umbrella organizations or institutions, because they're obviously going to be part of this process and are probably already engaged with the city in one form or the other. My curiosity is what groups exist in Hamilton that are in healthcare, education, business, and whatnot, who aren't necessarily the large umbrella organizations, but probably have high leverage points within their communities. Because, yeah, I guess I just don't want us to talk to people who are already being talked to and prioritize their ideas over those who aren't being talked to. So, but yeah, other than that, I think it's a great document.
Thank you, Tanashi, and well noted. And not to put our colleagues on the spot, but to our city staff who are here. So, we see this document as a little bit of a guide to, when we seek professional service support, kind of to help give a little bit more clear idea of what we're looking for. Again, might not be this comprehensive a scope. There may be some elements that are missing, but it's a bit of an indication of the direction we're thinking. Just based on your experience, like taking a look at it, is there anything you think that we should make sure we include across the vectors of the constituencies that we might reach out to or the methods of engagement?
Hi, Greg Tedesco, Senior Project Manager of Community Engagement. I think, it brings me back to some of the conversation at the last meeting when we discussed some of the feedback and the work that was gathered through some of the course of the work for our engagement plan here at the city. And the way that we looked at that was really utilizing kind of a couple different overarching approaches. So one, ensuring that there was a local organization that had a history of working with equity deserving groups to engage them directly to make sure that that was prioritized in the conversation. And then utilizing a separate process as well to reach out to some of the more typical kind of institutional partners that we've seen that are, at the table more often and are typically engaged through that process to make sure that we were prioritizing that first piece to make sure that those voices weren't lost in that conversation. So I think, you mentioned, bringing on external support to do some of that work. And I think that could be a consideration of that in terms of kind of separating those pieces out, not to keep them apart from each other, but just to prioritize that to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the conversation. And then I think in terms of the actual groups to engage with, I think this is a great starting point. And I think when we continue to engage in that conversation, and whether it's a survey, whether it's in-person engagement, whatever that conversation goes, I know our office and our colleagues can be supportive in terms of outreach. So we've got, a number of different tables that we sit on, and groups that we work with in the community, and a lot of different, individuals and other organizations in our networks that we can reach out to do that, and even leaning on other colleagues within the city as well to kind of tap the shoulder there to make sure that we're just really building on where those relationships exist, to make sure that there is trust in that process, and that people will feel safe, coming forward to present or to provide information in those different ways too. And I think, again, as the more detailed work gets going on, I think that is when the group will likely discuss different ways to do that, right? So potential for anonymous submissions, public submissions, those kinds of things, different ways, and just accessible forms of doing that. And I know that's where our team could come back and provide some support into that conversation, even if it is, an external organization or partner that is coming in to do that work. We can also, layer on some of the best practice and expertise that we have on our team, similar to what Jocelyn and Blaise spoke at the last time, based on our experiences of doing that engagement too. So more than happy to support that as it moves forward.
To Tinashe's point around corporations in the business community, we have community advisory committees that are also connected to the city. So that could be a place where we can look at and see who are on that roster. That tells us they're already community-minded, they're already connected, and it might be a good place to start.
Excellent. Yep.
Through the chair, Morgan Stahl, Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement. Madeline at one point mentioned the digital divide and some folks not having access to Engage Hamilton. So one other potential resource I wanted to offer is through our team, in addition to multiple modes of engagement, we can also provide support in terms of access to engagement and reducing some of those barriers. I think about even with the City Enrichment Fund, we offer the application now in multiple languages. So as a result of that, we have kind of a roster of different folks that do translation services for us. So those tools we are already equipped with and happy to lend them and use them through this process. I mean, translation services is one aspect of reducing a barrier, but I just want us to be mindful of, access and our ability to reduce barriers to access.
Excellent. Yeah, so thank you for the recommendations and offer to help from our city staff. That's huge. I mean, obviously our task force is new and just getting rolling, so leveraging existing resources is really valuable, and I appreciate, Morgan, the emphasis on accessibility. I mean, to even be able to provide input is, a method of making sure that this engagement is done well and is accessible to as many people and organizations as possible. And Greg, I really appreciate you, helping us work on that balance of prioritizing groups who are traditionally less represented in these conversations, and also engaging with those who are, because we're all part of the same city. So a lot of really useful insight. I'm taking kind of rapid notes as we go along. This document was presented as an input, so I don't think we need to formally approve anything being different with it, but we will, I'll ask in a minute for a motion to receive it, and also appreciate all the notes that have come forward that will feed ultimately in the short term into seeking our professional service support, but also into the long term into our recommendations. So I will ask, and you can correct me here, Madam Clerk, if I'm doing anything incorrectly in terms of process, but I will ask for a mover and seconder to put the item on the floor formally. Okay, Joanne and Bill. And further to the conversation that we've had and the notes that we've taken, any further conversation or anything to note about the work plan for engaging with interested parties at this point? Okay, so I think we're all good. So I'll ask for all in favor to receive this information. All right, we are all in favor, so thank you for that. Moving on to our further points on our work plan to formally talk about today. On point 9.1B is our work plan for professional support engagement, which Joanne has been leading. So Joanne, I'll turn it over your way.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful discussion, Greg, we had on it. It was very informative. I just want to say thank you very much. It really filled in a lot of blanks that we had. So after gathering the information we have, we know what we're going to have to retain a professional service, and it is going to cost more than $10,000. So we're going to meet with city staff, and we're going to talk about putting together an RFP for development. And because we expect to be over $10,000, of course, we'll have to enter into that process of being an RFP. We have begun to outline the elements that would be included in the scope of work, and we're in the process of completing it. And at this point, we intend to issue it as a public RFP, hopefully next week, but time pending.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Joanne. I'll just open the floor for any comments. Yep.
Maybe this is putting the cart before the horse, but to the points that Greg and Morgan made earlier about the expertise that is already available in-house, have we already started thinking about that external party or organization may work with the task force members and with city staff, or is that kind of details to be worked out after the fact?
Mark has graciously said that he would look at first we have to do a scope document. That has to get done. It tells about the work and an RFP person, what they're going to be in for. So Mark said he would gladly look at that and see if they're missing anything, if it's all in line before we actually submit it. So we have some great guidance there. We already have a lot of data we're already collecting, so we're going to be putting that document together very soon. So I think Mark can point out to us where we need to go elsewhere in that document if further guidance is needed.
Thanks, Joanne. Bill Tinashe, any thoughts on as we move into the RFP issuing process in the very near future?
I guess just really excited and anxious at the same time for the person or the team to be hired to do this work, because I think we're running slightly behind schedule. So it's exciting to see that we're kind of moving forward with this, and appreciate the city's help in putting this all together as well.
While we are here, maybe I could ask our colleagues on city staff who have done this before, hypothetically, if we were to have an RFP issued next week, what, in a reasonable but prompt time frame, could we expect to maybe have the process seen through by? How long do you anticipate that might take, just based off precedent?
Through the chair, we can get back to the co-chairs and the membership about that. I think we just want to look into a couple things on our end first. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we'll look forward to hearing back. Any guidance will help. But to Tinashe, to your point, yes, we want to move as expeditiously and as responsibly as possible.
Will that scope document be circulated for all of us to take a look at?
Yeah, it's got to come back here first for us to look at it first before it goes in.
Okay, so thank you. So everyone for their comments on that point. As well, point C, so our work plan for delegations. And this is based on the fact that we wanted to make sure that people knew that there were going to be opportunities to engage with this task force more formally. So there is a standing item on our meeting agenda for delegations. However, we thought we'd try to provide a little bit of direction to the public in terms of when that might be most poignant to come and communicate back to us through that method of engagement. So the conversations that we've had to date have been about putting a pin in our calendar for those activities to be happening in June and July. So by that point, obviously, we'll have our partner on board, and we'll have had an opportunity to communicate out to the community some clarity around the topics and framing that we would most ideally welcome their input and perspectives through delegations. So I'll just put that on the floor as kind of a general intention, and if anybody has any thoughts or comments, but I know that we wanted to just put that out there publicly, so those who are looking forward to delegating to our committee can know that there'll be an ideal opportunity to do that in that time frame of June and July.
Just a question in terms of preparing so that we are able to accept the maximum number of people who may be interested. I guess two aspects to that, whether there's going to be a time limit provided to people, or whether that's going to be more open-ended. And maybe alongside that, I think currently our meetings are scheduled at 2 hours, whether we may actually need to put in additional meetings, just holds on our calendars, just in case there was a lot of interest, or extend the duration just in anticipation, and we can always trim it back if we didn't need that time. So just for consideration for everybody.
Lorraine Kohler, Legislative Coordinator for the task force. Thank you for the question. Procedurally, each delegate is given 5 minutes. So that's quite straightforward. Some extensions can be made by motion, but generally speaking, it is 5 minutes long. As far as scheduling, it's up to the committee. We can run longer meetings on the already set days so that we can have, and I would recommend two different meetings to allow for everyone to come. And I lost my train of thought. But yes, so we can open up the timing of the meeting. We generally speaking schedule this meeting for 2 hours, but if more is required, that's what we do.
Thanks so much, Lorraine. And just a follow-up question to that, from a procedural standpoint, if I'm not mistaken, sometimes then with that 5-minute individual delegate time limit, organizations might bring multiple delegates. Again, I don't want to over-plan, but just to understand procedurally how that might work.
And through the chair, so that's something that is part of what I do in my agenda creation. The delegation requests all come through our office and would come to me, and then I would sort out who is speaking to the task force on that day. We often have groups who have several people, so they may come at it in different ways. They may individually decide to delegate, or some people may decide to delegate together.
Thank you. I think it's important, as you mentioned, if we have a couple of different dates, that we maybe do one during the day and one in the evening.
Yeah.
So that we can make ourselves available to I'm sorry. No problem. As you mentioned, sort of having a couple of different delegation days. My point was maybe having one during the day and one in the evening, so that we can make ourselves available to as wide a group in the city as possible.
Yeah, it's a great recommendation, Bill. I think in general, we want to keep our standing meeting schedule to keep the project moving along, but we may want to add in a specific meeting, maybe at an evening time frame, so that people are able to come in and speak at that point. So excellent recommendation.
I think there's going to be a lot of questions, not just the ones we just have here. So maybe if you guys started this process, maybe you meet with start with Lorraine on what are some of the parameters around it. Just come up with some kind of a guideline. And that way we can increase it or decrease it as we go. We can have a standard format of how we do delegations. And if a lot of people apply, we might do a full day of delegations, who knows? So I think we have to have a standard of how we're going to operate, and then bring that to the committee. We can decide it bang, bang, bang right in a row, and we're off and running. And then we can, adjust it as we go. But those are great suggestions for sure.
Through the chair, if I may add, something that we do at GIC Budget is they have specific days for public delegations, and that is something that is advertised. So there'll be an advertisement in the Hamilton Spectator, come and speak regarding City of Hamilton budget on X day from such and such a time, so people know that these are specific dates that are being set aside for delegations. And again, then, as I said earlier, process is the same. Delegations all come through the clerk's office. I sort them, organize them, and then we plan accordingly and have the meetings.
Okay, so notwithstanding the fact that, there's going to be multiple methods of engagement that we have, we do know one of them is going to be delegations. And regardless of, when we bring our partner on board and maybe decide how we're going to split up some of the other activities, I think what we could set as a task for this group is to report back in our May meeting with a little bit more just of like the structure and maybe our initial communications that we're going to send out, and maybe a recommendation as well for an additional date that we send out there, so that the delegation intentions can be kind of tabled and maybe approved at our next meeting.
One more point. We're going to have to do a lot of parallel streams as we're going, especially when you get that person on board. So I'm wondering too, does it have to take part in our meeting process? It doesn't, does it? Like, it doesn't have to be between, like we can meet at night, but not be our official meeting, right?
No,
No?
through the chair, no, it has. If this committee is if the task force is meeting, it is an open meeting, it is a public meeting, so it doesn't matter when it's happening, but it is open to the public, it will be live streamed.
So if we're expanding it, it will be on those meeting dates we're actually meeting
It
on.
can be, or it can be another date. You have all
But it
sorts
is a
of
meeting
options.
date. It's not a meeting just to have delegations.
It can also be a meeting that you schedule for the task force just for delegations.
So we're not going to do it in parallel streams is what I'm getting at. If we have our meeting, right, say we're meeting today and there's delegations, if we wanted to have a delegation all day tomorrow and still meet today, could we do that?
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's all I need to know. Because I think a lot of things are going to happen in a parallel kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, to the clerk's point, we will have likely an additional meeting. It will still be an official meeting, but the only agenda item may be just the delegations.
I think there's and we can lay that out with Lorraine, but, you know, obviously delegation day or days are important, but written submissions are also important and anonymous and whatever other, but looking at that timeline so that everything is sort of done by a certain day, whether it be in-person, written, whatever mechanism they're done. We try and dovetail that so everything sort of comes to by a certain date.
Yes, thank you for that, Bill. And I think what that's prompting for us is to bundle some of the communication, say if you're interested in providing feedback to our task force, here's the different methods you can do it, you know, here's the dates for it, and let's make sure that they all align together. So, thank you. Tanash, anything from your side on that point? Okay. So we've had an opportunity to talk through professional support engagement, our discussions around delegations, and as well our engagement in general. Those were the formal items under our discussion, but I'll just open the floor as part of our committee work if there's anything anyone feels that we've missed or wants to make sure that we chat about today. Oh, Tanashi, please go ahead.
Yes, I think one of the other things that just came to me as we were having this discussion is just also making sure that we prioritize youth as part of this process. After all, they're the ones who are going to be here long after we're gone. So I think having a specific within our engagement strategy, not just kind of embedding them within our outreach, but explicitly naming them or finding ways to intentionally get the young minds involved in this process would be really beautiful to see for something like this.
Thanks, Tanashi. Madeline?
Thanks, Tanashi. As you were speaking, I was, actually, the second thought I had, I'll say first, which is, I think they just had some sort of a weekend event that was for like high school students about civic engagement at City Hall, and I wonder whether there's any way to connect up with that pool of like people who have expressed an interest and engagement in how municipal processes work. So just a thought that sprung to my mind. But then as well, as you just started talking, I had, I think, probably an unrelated thought as I was picturing the delegations, which is I'm assuming it's going to be here at City Hall. And I'm assuming there will be an option for video delegation, which is good. But then as we're thinking about access for those in-person delegations, maybe that can be something for me and Bill to kind of work through as we think about these parameters, but I don't know whether that's something we should contemplate or explore about just the physical access of whether the delegates would, the only opportunity would be in City Hall if they wish to come in person, or whether there's a way to take our task force on the road for a formal meeting. That might be out of the realm of possibility, but I thought I'd mention it.
So by default, you know, we will have an opportunity for people to come meet us here in person and as well online. So I think the question is, I mean, is there any precedent or guidance on selectively holding meetings elsewhere is essentially what you're suggesting, not just here? Yeah.
If it is the task force's wish to do something like that, I'm sure staff and I will, the rest of the staff that are working with the task force would be happy to try and sort some options out for the group.
Okay. All right. Yep.
Through the chair, perhaps I can just speak to the youth piece that Madeline mentioned, because I was here present on the weekend for the Youth Summit. It was a collaboration of both individual counselors' offices and the youth strategy team. So they are a team internally at the city outside of, you know, our government relations and community engagement team, but we can certainly make those connections to get a better sense of, you know, how they facilitated that event and if there's ways that we can connect with both those youth and some of the school boards that were supportive of that summit over the weekend.
Yeah, that would be excellent. They sound like an excellent group to engage with, so I appreciate that. Okay, so we've captured a lot of notes here. I'll just kind of give a concluding comment to this section, which is obviously with the breadth of the topic of our committee, a lot of points, ideas, concepts are evolving. I know that we're organizing that information into kind of our buckets of thoughts and activities and how we're going to go about it. We do have one missing variable, which is, I know, a professional support partner that we intend to engage with. And so some of the activities are a bit challenging to finalize until we have that one more entity that we can decide in terms of how we're going to assign things. We've identified that that is a priority. So that'll be in terms of sequencing something that we follow up right away, while also making sure that we collate, collect all these notes and make sure they're being captured and considered for our reference. So I will just offer that as a concluding comment to 9.1 here. And if anybody else, if there's anything I missed. Greg?
Yeah, just through the chair, just one thing that I want to reiterate too is that it can be multiple partners that are brought on as well. It doesn't have to necessarily just be one. And so just to reiterate that, it can be, you know, different groups, and you as the task force act as that kind of central piece to bring that information together. So not to think that you only have to go with, you know, one large consulting organization or group or something like that. It can be, you know, as you see fit, you know, different ones brought on board to do different pieces of the work, and you act as kind of that glue that can bring that together. And just there is some precedent for that through different kinds of engagement work that's happened there. So just wanted to I don't know if that complicates things or makes it easier to think about in different ways, but it just gives you something else to think about in terms of moving forward. If you do go through an RFP process or something like that, and you do end up with an organization that can do some, not all, there is that potential to also bring on additional support to do that as well. So.
Based on your comments about precedent, did that impact how you had issued the RFPs before, or was it just I realized that, you know, you issued it looking for one party, but then afterwards it became evident that it might make sense to split up the work? Because that will impact our short term in terms of how it's constructed.
Yeah, I mean, we can resend the information on the RFP process. I mean, again, it depends on the level of work and the total costs, and all that information's on the city website in terms of what qualifies to go through an RFP process or not. But again, I think the example I used was, you know, to engage more with equity deserving groups in the city and utilizing or reaching out to different organizations with a bit of a scope of work that more aligned with what they were able to provide, right? So, and organizations that potentially had those relationships in community, had done that work before, and weren't necessarily, you know, starting at zero, and were able to kind of not necessarily speed the process along, but just have that level of comfort in terms of local outreach, local engagement on both sides of what that looked like. And so I think that was, you know, one example where that work was kind of split up and pieced out. And then for, again, the larger engagement, whether it was elected officials, institutions, those kinds of things, that was done more, I think from a broader perspective, from a larger consulting organization. That is not to say that relationships don't matter in that, but it's a bit more of a direct kind of ask and a conversation that goes that way in terms of bringing that information in that comes from those institutions. So, yeah.
And I appreciate the perspective in terms of like how those buckets might be quite different, how they might align. I'm just curious, like, did you issue 2 RFPs? Or was it just one, and then after the fact, it was determined that, you know, maybe it's best to piece it out?
I think in the example that I'm thinking of, it would have likely been under the $10,000 limit, so that we're able to provide a scope of work, engage with a number of different potential parties that fit within that, again, through the procurement guidelines, and then engage in a conversation around what was the best fit in terms of to go through that work. So it still went through the guidelines that we have for procurement at the city. It just was able to engage with a number of different local organizations to see what the best fit was to match with that scope of work and what the group is looking for in terms of getting back from that process. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks, Roy. It's very informative. Okay, so Joanne, you got some work to do. Yeah. Bill?
I'll just make one
Sorry.
point.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No,
go ahead, Jared.
Morgan reminded me, and it can be different scopes of work too, right? So it's not necessarily just the one scope of work that they take a piece of that. In that case, it was multiple scopes of work that were then, for different pieces of that bigger project that they were able to get.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think just to build a little bit on what Greg said, I think this is going to be sort of a priority item for us, as you said. And I kind of, if we're going to be able to have that scope of work document done in the next week or so, do we have to wait till May 15th? Can we call a special meeting just to deal with the approving the scope and getting the RFP out and going?
Through the chair, it wouldn't be a special meeting. We just schedule a regular meeting of the task force. So you set out some dates, but if more dates are required, we go ahead and schedule them.
So there's no mandate to wait until May 15th. Thank you.
And just for reference in processes like this, is it generally the case that, the formal of assessment of submissions would be done in a committee meeting or similar?
Through the chair, I'm going to need to confirm that offline. I'm
Okay.
not entirely sure.
Sounds good. So we'll make sure. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everyone. If no further discussion, so obviously we have some points to look into, so we'll make sure we get all these different clarifications. I will ask for a mover and seconder to receive the work plan updates vis-a-vis our conversation. Oh, you're moving, okay. So a mover and seconder to receive the work plan updates based on our discussion today and the notes that we've made so far. So Madeline moves and a seconder. Joanne, all in favor? Okay, we are all in favor, so motion is carried. We have received our work plan items. So we are an efficient committee today, a little bit ahead of time. Before we adjourn, I will open the floor if there's any other business or anything anyone would like to discuss.
Hi. I was a couple minutes late, so I just want to apologize. I don't think I've introduced myself to the group yet. My name is Wynn Baker. I'm the Stakeholder Relations and Strategic Initiative Specialist with the Mayor's Office. Uzma was unable to join today, so I'm taking her spot and very happy to be here.
Glad to have you with us, Wynn. Thank you. Okay, any other business before we wrap up? All right, well, we got some work to do, which we will be moving on expeditiously, but we are finished for today, so I'll ask for a mover and seconder to adjourn today's meeting. Bill and Joanne, thank you. Are we all in favor for adjournment? We are. Okay, thank you, everybody. So meeting complete. Thank you.